Bring us the girl and wipe away the debt. That's Booker's only motivation for taking this job, but it becomes clear within the first 5 minutes of how ridiculous that is. Since a few loan sharks would not equal the threat Booker finds himself up against almost immediately upon arriving in Columbia. Comstock knew Booker was coming to take Elizabeth away, and sent word ahead to the lighthouse keeper to stop him. I'm guessing the Lutesses killed him since Booker finds him dead and the game never explains why. But if Comstock wanted to thwart Booker, he didn't try hard enough. He could have had the rocket destroyed or maybe sabotaged to kill Booker when he used it. He could have moved Columbia to another location like this map suggested does regularly, and he could have stationed armed guards inside the baptism hall where Booker arrives. Instead, he told a single lighthouse watchman to stop a former soldier and Pinkerton detective.
Wait a minute, that card.
Truly a game for smart, intellectual gamers. Show of hands, who would sit in a chair with obvious arm restraints? Unless Columbia has some SpaceX-style rockets, this rocket is one use only, and would have to be replaced after launching. Not to mention rocket exhaust would destroy the lighthouse. Steampunk. Still the worst genre in science fiction. Presumably all of these people are new arrivals to Columbia like Booker, yet the lighthouse rocket only has one seat, and the nearest other location people can use to make the pilgrimage here is in New York. After a near drowning in the baptism, the priest throws people out of the tunnel face down and unconscious in a pool of water. At 15,000 feet, the average temperature is only 5 degrees Fahrenheit with low atmospheric pressure. There would be no living in a city in the sky. Plants wouldn't grow here and everyone would freeze or asphyxiate. Not to mention the higher cancer rate everyone would have due to the higher radiation exposure you receive at high altitudes. That being said, damn, this game is pretty. It's easily one of the most well-visualized games I've ever seen. Booker must suffer from an extreme case of pica, because he is constantly stuffing his face with every bit of food he comes across no matter where he finds it. He's just as likely to eat a hot dog off a stand as he is to rummage through a trash can or a dead corpse for something to eat. Water must be a precious resource up here, yet these kids are wasting all of it playing in a hydrant.
God only knows what I'd be without you.
Taking more modern songs and covering them in ragtime and coming up with a pretty good explanation for why that is one of the more clever parts of the game. Honestly, I was more impressed with that idea than anything else the game presents.
Would you care for a boutonniere? We're raising money for the Girls' Patriotic League.
Laura Bailey plays most of the female NPCs in this game, making this another example of Troy Baker and Laura Bailey working together in a game.
I told you a man could shoot lightning from his fingers now. Would you believe me?
I have a suspicion that Vigors are in this game only because they played a part in the original Bioshock, and the devs felt they had to be included here. But plasmids were tied heavily into the plot and downfall of Rapture. Use of them caused people to mutate after a while and lose their minds. It's why everyone in Rapture was a freak. Vigors are the exact same thing, even made from the same source, yet don't have the same downside. The other thing that doesn't fit is that making yourself better through genetic engineering fit into the objectivist philosophy of Rapture. How would giving yourself genetic superpowers go over in a Christian ethno-state that denies evolution and believes that the white man was made in God's image? Vigors are just commercialized genetic engineering. How would one give you the ability to shoot ghosts at machines and people to control them and levitate enemies off the ground? None of the vigors can actually be explained through genetics. These things are magic. Also, this vigor is given out for free and allows anyone to hack vending machines for money. The vending machines and security automatons of Columbia are made by the same company that makes Vigors. Why would Fink Industries make and give away a product that undermines their other products? Comstock knows what Booker looks like. Instead of vague descriptions like the initials AD carved into his hand, why not put up images of his face? Columbia is an ultra-nationalist white ethno-state that oppresses minorities in almost comically vile ways. This is a floating city created well after slavery was made illegal but before civil rights, meaning Comstock didn't have to allow minorities here and could have built a flying gated community if he wanted to. The game tries to explain the minority presence away with them being used for cheap labor, but this is 1912. All labor was cheap. If Columbia was this racist, they would more than likely be forcing minorities back to the service once Columbia seceded from the Union. And for the oppressed minorities living here, freedom is just a parachute jump away. So it's not like they were actually trapped here.
Why don't you give her a throw? Wait! It's him!
There is no way the cop noticed AD branded onto Booker's hand in the split second he reached back to throw the ball at the announcer. The back of Booker's hand wasn't even facing the cop. We've weaponized these things. They have little fidgets that spin. We're not sure what to call them though. Bioshock Infinite deviates from the survival horror gameplay of the original game in favor of being a straight-up shooter. It even gives you a recharging energy shield. They kinda forgot to give it better shooting mechanics in the transition though, because the combat still feels the same as the first game, which was built around small, intense encounters with limited ammo. Only now I'm never struggling for ammo and there are more enemies who just use guns. This mural looks like a racist cover of a Sid Meier's Civilization game.
Stand down! Stand down!
Comstock wants to get a word in so badly, he tells his men to stand down instead of shooting at Booker.
What brought you to Columbia, Booker? Bring us the girl and wipe away the debt?
I'm not certain how Comstock knows about the debt issue, since that's something Booker's mind fabricated on its own, so Comstock couldn't see it through a tear like he does with other things he knows about. Also, Comstock should recognize that line from years ago when he had Lutece use it as means of buying Anna from Booker.
The Lord forgives everything, but I'm just the prophet of it, so I don't have to.
Comstock gets way more screen time than the first game's antagonist Andrew Ryan, but fails at being as intriguing and thought-provoking as Ryan's one appearance in-game. Despite knowing that Booker is here for Elizabeth, Comstock posted no guards on Monument Island and sends none to it after Booker manages to arrive there. In fact, the place is conveniently empty. Elizabeth has been kept in this tower her entire life due to her powers. As Comstock's daughter, he plans for her to one day take his place in ruling Columbia and bringing destruction to the surface world. He might have helped that plan by raising her and indoctrinating her in Columbia's ideas from a young age. Instead, she's a free-spirited Disney princess who is the complete opposite of what Comstock needs her to be and doesn't even know that he's her father. Were I keeping a girl locked up in a tower, I don't think I would supply her with books on lockpicking as well as tools and spare locks to practice on. Elizabeth's power allows her to open tears to other worlds and time periods, meaning she could escape Columbia rather easily as seen here, or at the very least get out of her tower. But apparently every single time she's tried, something on the other side has stopped her. This is the only case where Truck-kun almost hit someone already inside of another world. Only the weebs are going to understand this sin. Apparently, wind shear only kicks in at 15,500 feet and is completely calm back at 15,000. Will Smith tried to warn us about young white girls carrying quantum physics books in Men in Black.
There's no way out, trust me, I've looked. Stop it, you're too impatient, that's enough!
What about this?
What about it?
This is the way out.
Booker was given a key by the Luteces to open the door in Elizabeth's tower. My question is, why is the lock to her door on the inside of her room and not the outside?
Which way?
Yes, upwards, to the top of the statue where there is no escape. That fall would dislocate your shoulder if not rip your arm off. The reason Booker and Elizabeth fell from the tower is because Songbird knocked the head off while they were still standing on it, yet here we see the head is only now falling off. They both survived this. I'm not sure where Elizabeth learned to swim locked up inside of her tower, but somehow she dove into the water and pulled an unconscious Booker out.
Okay, I won't be long. I won't be long, Mr. DeWitt.
Sure, knock yourself out. There's only a giant birdman flying around looking for you as well as your father and all of his men. No one on the beach recognizes Elizabeth. While she has never appeared in public before now, her statue, which was a perfect replica of her, dominated the city skyline. Also, about Elizabeth's statue. Statues that big take a long time to build. Years, in fact. Elizabeth is only 19 years old and she has lived inside that statue for almost her entire life, so they would have had to start building it when she was very young. Yet the statue is a perfect replica of the teenage Elizabeth. No one on the beach noticed Booker and Elizabeth fall from the sky and into the water or carried when Booker was being resuscitated. This artificial beach is a hard sell. Where would you be getting enough seawater 15,000 feet in the air?
What could be better than this?
How about Paris?
Paris? I don't understand. How could we get there?
Elizabeth lives in a flying city. How do you figure Paris is ever going to compete or be more amazing? It's not even like Elizabeth has gotten used to living here, so it holds no new experiences for her. She spent all of her time locked up in a statue and never got to see any of it.
Yeah, send in the bird. We're ready to execute.
Being pretty obvious about this trap. I mean, Booker can clearly hear you. If you ever wondered where the sound effects animators use for Rule 34 porn of Elizabeth comes from, well now you know.
Looks like this runs exclusively on Shock Jockey.
Of course it does. Where in the hell are we gonna find that?
Look! Come see the future of power at the Hall of Heroes.
Huh. Well, that's convenient.
So convenient that it makes no sense. How can Shock Jockey be the future of power if it's already powering everything in Columbia?
Oh, it's a bee. I hate these things.
Jeez, just kill it.
No, it'll sting me.
Elizabeth!
I have a better idea.
If Elizabeth can open a tear to get rid of a bee, she can open one to the surface.
I'll be. Slate? Is that you?
You've always been different, haven't you, Booker?
Slate fought alongside Booker at Wounded Knee, and recognizes him at once even from a distance despite the fact that it's been 22 years since they last met. Slate never recognizes Comstock, however. You might think that Comstock's accelerated aging from using tears is the reason. The game certainly does. But Slate was part of Columbia before the Boxer Rebellion happened, before Comstock had even seen much accelerated aging. He just had a beard back then. Slate should have recognized Comstock as Booker. According to Slate, there is no history of Comstock before his baptism, but Columbia was funded by the US government, meaning some no-name man with no identification managed to convince Congress to approve money for the creation of a city in the sky. While only 2 examples don't necessarily make a trend, the 2 games that explore America's history of racism, this game and Mafia 3, both ended up relying on racist funhouse rides to get across how racist things were. It's like developers think we need racist history to fit into a children's show format in order for us to understand it. Comstock claiming glory, a wounded knee, and Peking isn't a new thing. That's been part of his cult of personality since he seceded from the Union 10 years ago. Why is Slate only now throwing a fit over Comstock's stolen honor?
When you were unconscious on the beach, you kept repeating a woman's name. Anna.
I don't want to talk about that.
Booker says he doesn't want to talk about Anna, but at this moment he doesn't even know who Anna is. So why wouldn't he be curious over the initials on his hands and the name he keeps mumbling?
How do you think I ended up here? I gambled, and now I owe money to men you don't want to be in debt to. I come here to pay it back. Me busting you out, what do you think that was? Charity?
Who sent you?
Somebody who was willing to take my marker in exchange for you.
This explanation no longer holds any weight. Booker has demonstrated he can take on the armed forces of a steampunk city. If he's capable of all that, why would he ever be threatened by some mobsters? And while this debt story is a fabrication Booker's own mind cooked up, it actually was the reason he sold Anne to Comstock years ago.
What is that? 40 north by 74 west. That's not Paris, that's New York.
While Booker was planning to take the airship to New York, he could have explained to Elizabeth that it was just a pit stop. You can't exactly fly an airship with no supplies all the way across the Atlantic Ocean.
I owed money, and there's a fellow he offered to wipe away my debt in exchange for you.
Booker already explained earlier to Elizabeth that he took this job because someone offered to wipe away his debt. What did she think that meant? Just letting her go? The Vox Populi come across the airship after Elizabeth knocks Booker out with a wrench. She somehow gets off the airship without the Vox realizing it, because if they had, they most certainly would have wanted to capture Comstock's daughter. Those rocks would have to be brought up from the surface. It would make far more sense to break them up on the ground rather than have a chain gang do it up here.
Comstock is the god of the white man, the rich man, the pitiless man. But if you believe in common folk, then join the Vox.
If you play this game and Metal Gear Solid 2 back-to-back, you are strangely woke to all of today's social and technological problems. Here Booker gets caught up between what is basically Antifa and white nationalists.
Down in Finkton, there's a gunsmith who can supply weapons to our cause. Get our guns from him.
There's really no reason to send Booker to talk to Chen about the guns he was making for the Vox. Chen's workshop isn't far from here, and is located in the minority section of Columbia. Elizabeth was on an airship deck when the handyman threw Booker over the edge. She saves his life by opening a tear to give him a balloon to land on. Then somehow she's standing on a nearby platform when just a second ago she was on a departing ship.
It's Slate's locker. He must have worked here. This is my mother's diary.
Slate was in possession of Lady Comstock's journal that revealed the truth that she was not Elizabeth's mother. That evidence would have been the perfect way to discredit Comstock, but he never used it. Also, all the important information is in the middle of the book cliché.
What's going on?
DeWitt, Fink here. Listen, my boy, we've had our eye on you, and I can tell you right now that you are our top candidate.
Fink thinks it's a good idea to hire the guy the entire city is looking for as muscle to put down a labor dispute.
The body's gone.
It was never here.
It's another Columbia.
A different Columbia.
The same coin.
A different perspective.
Heads.
Tails.
Dead.
Alive.
We have to go through.
Chen was taken by Fink and murdered, so Booker can no longer get the weapons for Fitzroy. But because this plot employs a Schrodinger's cat theory of quantum mechanics for its multiverse, Elizabeth opens a tear to a world where Chen is still alive and they go through. The problem is, inside this new world they don't have an agreement with Fitzroy, so she would have no reason to give Booker the airship for the weapons. Chen is still alive in this reality, but all of his machines were impounded by the police. So Booker and Elizabeth find the machines at the police station, where since they can't move them by themselves, open a tear to another world where Chen's machines were never seized by the police and he made the weapons for the box. Meaning they travel to a world where they have less than zero leverage to negotiate with Fitzroy for the airship, since she already has the weapons in this world. I think rather than all this reality jumping, the two should have stolen another airship. It's not like there was only the one.
Booker, if the Vox get their weapons, there's going to be a revolution just like Les Miserables. These people are gonna have better lives.
I don't think Elizabeth ever finished reading Les Miserables if she thinks that.
You're Booker DeWitt, the hero of the Vox!
What the hell are they talking about?
Look at that poster. In this world, you're a hero.
I remember I led the Vox. Slate and I... burned down the Hall of Heroes.
In this world, Booker never met Elizabeth because Comstock hid her away in Comstock House before he could reach her. So he led the Vox Revolution against Comstock, then died, which should mean there is another Elizabeth in this world being held captive by Comstock. But she's never mentioned or seen despite how important that would be to the narrative.
Listen, I got you your guns. I'm here for my airship.
The Booker of this reality didn't even make that deal with Fitzroy.
My Booker DeWitt was a hero to the cause, a story to tell your children. You just complicate the narrative.
Wouldn't having the Vox kill their martyr also complicate said narrative? You would have a lot of trouble shoving a pair of scissors all the way through a person. Comstock placed these statues all around the city on the off chance Elizabeth ever escaped. They would play a song as she walked past one to attract the songbird. I know the guy is supposed to have the gift of prophecy, but this seems a little redundant. Songbird has no reason this time for stopping his attack like he did back at the beach when the water pressure started cracking his lens. After it crashed the airship, it should have grabbed Elizabeth.
That's Comstock House. If we're gonna find him, we should start there.
There is no reason for the two of them to go looking for Comstock. All they need to do is get away from Columbia. Right in front of them is an airship evacuating people from the city. They could escape right now. And here's where most of the Rule 34 porn of Elizabeth takes its inspiration from.
Lady Comstock, how lovely to see you. Wonderful of you to make the journey, especially considering your painful death 19 years ago.
Not only do they have AI here apparently, it has a sense of humor. Not smart enough to remove Lady Comstock's authority to open the door despite being dead though. All it needs is the palm print, because of course they have fingerprint scanners here too. In order to get inside Lady Comstock's tomb, Elizabeth first opens a tear to place a lock on the gate that she then picks to open the previously unlocked gate. If there was no lock on the gate in this reality, then that means it wasn't locked. Comstock was so sure Elizabeth would one day escape and visit her mother's grave that he installed a siphon in the mausoleum to suck out some of her power and bring back a version of Lady Comstock. Comstock brings over a half-dead, half-living extra-dimensional ghost of Lady Comstock, thinking it would somehow stop Elizabeth from following Booker around. This could have gone very wrong for Comstock. He even knew his wife hated Elizabeth since she believed Elizabeth was Comstock's bastard daughter. Here's an unfun boss fight you had to fight multiple times as you track her down across the district. This game, which up until this point had pretty tight pacing, grinds to a halt as you backtrack across town to find tears that reveal Comstock had his wife and the Lutesses killed. Booker survives this. How did Elizabeth get all the way up here? They were on a bridge and then Songbird threw Booker through a window in the top floor of the adjacent building, and there's no open door leading into this room. Booker has to exit through the hole in the wall Songbird makes after it flies away with Elizabeth. After everything Booker has been through, traveling through multiple realities and time periods, it takes him an unbelievable amount of time to figure out he isn't in Kansas anymore after walking through a tear. The Boys of Silence are some of the best enemies in the game, with the game's one and only jump scare that actually gets you. In this timeline, after Elizabeth was captured by Songbird, she was turned into Columbia's new tyrant by Comstock, but the only reason that could happen would be Booker never rescuing her. And the reason he didn't rescue her was because the old Elizabeth pulled him through a tear to this time so she could then send him back to where she took him from so he could rescue Elizabeth properly. Had she not pulled him through time, he was going to rescue her anyway. Also, how could Elizabeth take over Columbia and rule it when it seemed like the Vox were winning the Civil War? I don't think Columbia would fare very well against a 1980s American military. What are some steampunk airships going to do against jet fighters and cruise missiles? I do love the homage to Wizard of Oz with Elizabeth opening a tear to Kansas and letting a tornado ravage a lab after Booker shuts down the siphon. In this world, Comstock hid this reality's Elizabeth away in Comstock House and Booker died leading the uprising. Yet this reality's Comstock also captured Booker's Elizabeth. Shouldn't he have this reality's Elizabeth here with him? Irrational Games learned that they weren't so good at designing boss fights in the first Bioshock, so they didn't bother with one in this game, and just give you a tower defense level on Comstock's airship. I honestly would have preferred a lame final boss fight. This reality's Booker never met with Elizabeth in the tower, so half of this tower wouldn't have already been destroyed by Songbird's earlier attack. On one hand, minus a sin for suddenly traveling to Rapture. On the other, I kinda wish I was playing the first Bioshock since it's way better.
City at the bottom of the ocean. Ridiculous.
I don't think I even need to point out the absurdity of that statement.
What are all these lighthouses? Why are we... Who are...
There are a million worlds. All different, all similar. Constants and variables.
What?
There's always a lighthouse. There's always a man. There's always a city.
There are a million worlds, and apparently all of them are Bioshock games, which is odd considering we haven't gotten a new one in over 6 years now.
It'll happen all the same.
Why?
Because it does. Because it has. Because it will.
There's so many choices.
They all lead us to the same place. Where it started.
I do love the fact that this game managed to have meta commentary on game structure just like the first Bioshock did without feeling like it was just retreading the same ground. The first game was making a statement that you don't actually have freedom of choice in a game, that you're only doing it because someone is pulling your strings while giving you the illusion of free will. This game flips that around and points out that even when a game allows you to make choices, your choices are largely irrelevant and don't matter in the larger narrative. The moment when you realize you've been staring at your daughter's cleavage the entire time. Elizabeth only just became a god and has already started teleporting just to be a dick. It seems rather easy to replicate Elizabeth's powers, since she only has them because her pinky finger was cut off by the tear, leaving part of her in another reality. The reason Booker didn't remember any of this and manufacture the story that he was here to wipe away the debt was because when crossing over to another reality, the mind doesn't cope well with conflicting versions of yourself. But that's only been in cases where someone was dead in one reality and alive in another. Comstock crossed over to Booker's reality when he bought Anna from him years ago, yet didn't create new memories to explain it to himself. And here is where the rest of the ideas for Rule 34 porn of Elizabeth come from. I really like this ending, but it doesn't make a bit of sense. In order to kill Comstock in every reality, he has to be killed before he was even born. Since Comstock and Booker are the same person, the only difference being that Booker rejected the baptism after Wounded Knee and Comstock accepted it, Booker has to be drowned to make sure the choice is never even made. But that event already happened, which means this is creating a time paradox, since Elizabeth would never be born if Booker drowned in the baptism. And this isn't the past Booker that's being drowned, it's the Booker 20 years after that crossed realities with Elizabeth. And finally, this is still a choice in itself. Booker has to choose to be drowned here, and the act of choosing splits off in two different directions and forms two different realities. One where Booker chose to be drowned here, thereby killing both himself and Comstock, and one where he didn't. And then you have a post-credit scene implying that Booker is alive and lives with Anna because he never sold her to Comstock. But you know what? I still like it since it's damn riveting and makes me think about it. So I'll meet you in the middle and give it half a sin.
I never find that as satisfying as I'd imagined.